Hi, friends. This episode of Big Blue Banter is brought to you by Prize Picks. Head on over to Prize Picks and use promo code BANTER, and they'll match up to $100 on a new deposit. Thank you and enjoy.
Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Villado. It's a Friday afternoon in the offseason. And offseason means let's have some fun. Let's talk about the hot topics and Giants Twitter. There's always a new one every day. And this recent topic got a lot of people fired up yesterday, Nick. And for those who haven't caught up, we have had a few podcasts before this week. One I really thought was one of our best in a while. So if you haven't caught up, check out our part one of our offseason series. It's going to be a 5-part series we're going to get back into early next week, probably on Monday. And that's going to be the 5 biggest burning questions facing the Giants. We tackled the quarterback situation, as in, what do? Do they move forward with Jones? And if they do they want to try to win now with Jones, or do they try to find another quarterback? And how do they do that? And despite all that, Nick, and it was an hour plus podcast that some people loved, most people loved. One person said it should have been shorter. I get it. Look, we're trying to condense at times, but quarterback's not a position that takes short amount of periods of time to talk about. But even through that, Nick, we didn't even touch on the one possibility that we'll have to tackle another day, which is the possibility of trading for Justin Fields. We tackled just about every avenue possible at quarterback and mentioned every possible option, but the Fields option. And that's an interesting one that I would be curious to get your thoughts on, Nick, at some point, and my thoughts as well. Just kind of a brief recap for me would be considering how few upside options seem available to me at quarterback this offseason, especially once Ben Johnson gets that Washington job, which I think locks in Drake May, or at worst, Jane Daniels at number 2 overall.
Terrible for the Giants.
Ben Johnson's not going to not take a quarterback. He's not an idiot. He's taking a quarterback there. But they'll need to find him offensive line, by the way. Washington is nothing on the offensive line, so it's not that good. But, not many upside options. Fields comes to mind, Nick, as a potential upside option. I'm going to be honest with you, just based on the physical tools, though. It's physical tools plus just the prayer and the hope that Brian Dable can completely rework his mind, Nick, and get him thinking on just a completely different wavelength. Like, forget everything that you've been taught so far from your coaches at the NFL level. Eberflus and whoever they've had in there, not Eberflus, he's the head coach. Whoever those OCs have been in there. I need you to think my way. And if you could click, there's obvious physical tools there. I mean, everyone says Daniel Jones can make all the throws. He can make all the throws, I guess, but he doesn't have anywhere near the velocity or arm talent of Justin Fields.
No, Justin Fields is an alien.
Athlete. Yes.
He's an alien with that and with the athletic ability.
Yeah.
And you're right, dude. He's only 24 years old. We'll save this for another podcast. Yes. I typically don't like trading for young quarterbacks who are about to make bank. That's something that I am usually opposed to. But Justin Fields is very unique in the sense that he is a freak athlete with a freak arm. And we've seen Dable take players who, like Josh Allen in the past, who didn't necessarily have the mental side of it nailed down and then force them to be essentially the superstars that they become, right? So there's a little bit to that.
The only thing that scares me with that, and we'll talk again more about this if it ever, we may never do a pod on this, but if the rumors start up and there's actual speculation that the Giants may be interested in this route, that's when we'll tackle it. But the one thing is, like with Allen and versus the Field situation, is Allen was fresh. That's the one thing that scares me. Like, he was fresh coming into the NFL. That's the first system he was taught. He was taught how to learn that way. Fields has been so much crap has been put into his head, similar with Jones with all the systems. It's like, is he there? Is there any chance to break this mentally? Maybe, but it just scares me a little on that front. And then one final thing on that, Nick, is just the wrap up of like the somewhat irony of if they were to make that move and trade the Giants for Justin Fields, they'd be putting him in a very similar situation to where the Giants were at with Daniel Jones for the 2022 season, where like if you could coax up a really good season from this quarterback on film with a good scheme, but it's also a scheme, or it's also a sample size that will get figured out after 8 games of film go out, like Daniel Jones 2022. You are putting yourself in the same position of you're probably going to make him go through a prove-it year. Then you get stuck with potentially giving him that massive contract again after one prove-it year. And then you're doing the same thing essentially of bad sample size for most of it, one good year of the, and then forget the rest of the sample size. Let's give the contract based on the 1 good year and the projection of that moving forward. So it's a little tricky from that standpoint, but obviously the Giants may have to get creative when it comes to quarterback this offseason if their objective is to upgrade at that position. We don't know yet if they're even interested in that, but today is not about that. Today we want to talk about these Kayvon Thibodeaux comments on a recent podcast. I think it was Carmelo Anthony's podcast. Some interesting stuff there. I think there's a lot of angles from them, but let's start with the angle that is being talked about the most, Nick. And I know we have this clip up, so we're going to play it in a second, but that angle is Kayvon Thibodeaux essentially saying, look, I think the locker room, or at least from his perspective, felt like Saquon Barkley should have been paid before Daniel Jones got his contract this past offseason. Obviously, the result was Daniel Jones got his big 4-year, $160 million contract, and Barkley didn't get the contract or didn't get paid in that sense. He ultimately signed a 1-year deal with the Giants, a little bit more than what he would have got on the franchise tag, Nick. And so ultimately, it wasn't that he got paid, Jones, before Barkley that he got paid at all, and Barkley did not get paid from the Giants just yet, at least not in the sense that Kayvon Thibodeaux is saying. So let's play the clip and let's hear Kayvon's thoughts on this.
And it's the salary cap what people don't realize. That's what that's like.
So, but that's always the issue.
Yeah,
money.
It's money. Yeah,
it's always the issue.
You pay Daniel Jones $40 million. It was a great. I believe
a lot of people was mad at that. A lot of people was mad at that. But I was like,
let me tell you what I'm mad at, and it's the only thing I'll say about that. What I'm mad about is that Saquon, because if you look at the game, the tape, Saquon was responsible for at least 30% of our explosive plays.
Oh, yeah. Not more.
Talking about the year we won the playoff game. So for me and for the integrity of, working together and hard work, and we all believe the same things, I feel like Saquon should have got paid first. That's what I feel. And maybe, who I don't know the back end. Maybe it's a franchise. Maybe it's an extension. Maybe it's blah, blah, blah. That's none of my business. I don't,
that's just focus on me. And that's the respect we was talking about.
Like, exactly. With the team chemistry and all that. Because we see it.
Why not? Like when you think of Saquon, who you think of?
That's
the Giants.
He's the face of the game. Yeah,
and it's tough though, because as a player, you as a team, we know who's putting in work and not. That was the biggest thing my coach I learned. He said, listen, only way you're going to get respect is by what you do on the field. I'm talking about when I got there, I was a number 5 draft pick. Nobody liked me. As soon as I sacked Lamar Jackson, everybody was, man, good game. Oh, my boy. Yeah. You good? You need some extra food? It was amazing.
Get the game ball.
The first reaction, Dan, is Saquon Barkley was offered a contract, and we don't know the exact number, but it was reported around $13.5 million during the season. I think it was after the Texans game, or maybe it was after the bye week. And Saquon Barkley bet on himself, and ultimately he ended up losing. I mean, that contract would have been a lot more advantageous for him. It would have gave him a lot more money, because all he got paid this year was slightly over $10 million on a 1-year deal. And that was reportedly a 3-year deal, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was a 2-year deal, but we can't overlook that context. That is a huge part of this entire conversation. So that was my first takeaway.
Let's tackle that one first. It wasn't my first takeaway, but it's something that I've obviously thought about as well. A lot of people in my replies have mentioned it, and it's a good point. I think from Kayvon's perspective, he's probably not in tune with all of that. I would imagine, Nick. I don't think he's following. He kind
of mentioned that too. He's like, I don't really know what goes on the back end, all that kind of stuff. So then again, perception is reality, right, Dan? Like perception is reality. And this is the perception that's in the locker room. So that's what you have to contend with if you're the New York Giants.
Correct. That's exactly. You nailed it right there. The perception is reality. To Kayvon and to the rest of these guys, they don't know the reports of Saquon turning down bigger contract or Saquon having this potential offer that he didn't ultimately accept. What all they know is in the end, Saquon didn't get his deal and Daniel Jones got his deal. And that's really all it is. As far as, from Saquon, if, am I blaming the Giants if you're going to, if I'm not saying you're going down that route, but that would be almost where my mind goes when you say he got this offer, but he didn't take it. I don't even view it like that. To me, the players don't always, I'm just going to be obvious and clear with this. I know a lot of people disagree with this or just think, whatever the players say is right. And they know football. They played football. I don't think the player's always right about this. I don't think the Giants, because this didn't happen, made a mistake to not pay Saquon Barkley. I think it's clear and obvious right now to anyone with, a thinking brain that they made a mistake to pay Daniel Jones. That's obvious. But the situation still needs to be considered. I always feel like the context is always forgotten here. The Giants last season on tape were unbelievably bad at stopping the run. They had no options on the roster to play middle linebacker heading into the 2024 season, Nick. And you know this as well as I do. They literally had to go to Jared Davis for a playoff game out of nowhere, a practice squad guy from the Lions who had no business playing in that game. And they had Jalen Smith operating in the role for the whole year. And it's not like you could just walk into the draft and be like, you know what? That's where we'll do it. We'll do it round 1 of the draft and we'll take whoever it may be. We'll get the kid out of Iowa, Jack Campbell. We'll take him in round 1 because we just need it so bad. That's not how you operate a franchise. You don't draft for need with your premium asset, your first round pick. The best way to do it, they located a guy they loved, Bobby Okereke. He had great tape against the Giants when they played the Colts last year. They interviewed him. They met with him. Great personality. And we'll get to that in this interview from Kayvon too, because it's not just all about his comments about the Barkley Jones thing. It's also about what he said about Okereke and the leadership role that he's taken immediately on this team and the kind of mentor he's been for Kayvon Thibodeaux and his mindset as a player get Bobby Okereke. You don't get Bobby Okereke if you sign Saquon Barkley first and you tag Daniel Jones. You just don't do it. The money doesn't work like that. The salary cap situation doesn't work like that. The only reason Bobby Okereke was fit was because the Giants were able to sign Daniel Jones to this massive contract and then backload it mostly. I mean, Daniel Jones's cap hit was like $13 million in his first year on an average salary that's $40 million per year. Where do you think all that money's going to hit the Giants against the cap? It's going to hit them this year in 2024. It's going to hit them the next year in 2025 and 2026 if they stay through this contract. That's where all the Jones money is. And then on September 3rd, Shane restructured the Jones contract again, converting $8 million of that into a signing bonus, and that cleared up another $6 million in cap space that allowed them to operate in season. Again, without all of this, if you sign Saquon Barkley that deal, and then you tag Jones for what was this franchise tag for quarterbacks, Nick? Do you remember? I don't remember it exactly, but it's in I think it was 35 or 36 for the franchise tag for quarterbacks. So if you tag Jones at that price, there's no Bobby Okereke at all on your franchise. And then you walk into the season after winning a playoff game and you say, we still don't have a single middle linebacker that's really even NFL competent level right now. So what are we even trying to accomplish? Like, what are we telling our team right now? So I still think that context matters, Nick. And I don't think the Giants really had many options other than to do what they did, because, maybe long-term it would have been prudent for them to be like, we believe in Tyrod Taylor to potentially run us back and do as good a job as Jones did in 2022, even though the fact that his injuries have to be factored in, both quarterbacks are injured, but that's not a reality. Like, that would never happen in the NFL, right? Like, we've covered the sport long enough to know, like, that shit doesn't happen.
Of course. And let's look at what the Giants dealt with, the brass, Joe Schoen in the front office. When they came in here to New York, they were expecting a longer type of rebuild. That's what was somewhat, I think, behind closed doors pitched to John Mayer. They didn't pick up Daniel Jones' fifth-year option. So they end up winning football games with Daniel Jones. And in season, they kind of had to adjust their plan on the fly, saying, we're competing now with Brian Daboll, who ended up winning Coach of the Year. And we have all of these holes on this roster. Should we keep Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley in-house? They wanted to keep Saquon Barkley. They offered Saquon Barkley the contract before Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley and his camp denied that contract. And then come the offseason, I think you nailed it right there. You need to find other pieces to shore up this roster. You need to get Wink Martindale, a middle linebacker. You need to get whoever the defensive coordinator is, a linebacker. So you bring in Bobby Okereke, right? So Joe Schoen and the Giants front office, they were just trying to adjust to success that they didn't necessarily expect this early on. If you believe, and in retrospect, in hindsight, we can, I think, agree that this was not the prudent or the right move, giving Daniel Jones the contract that he received.
From a long-term standpoint. Short-term,
from a long-term standpoint, right? But if you believe he is that quarterback, which it seemed like they believed, hey, because they didn't have that many receivers last year, right? And Saquon Barkley was responsible for all of those explosive plays. And I'm really glad, by the way, that Kayvon Thibodeaux brought that up.
That was my first takeaway I was going to get to. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So yeah.
That's where my mind went with that. Yeah.
Maybe he listens to this podcast. Who knows? I highly doubt that. But because we've been talking about explosive plays for quite a while, right? But if you really do believe as a front office that Daniel Jones is a quarterback of the future, you have to prioritize that quarterback over the running back, especially when the running back has already declined a perfectly fair deal by reports, a perfectly fair deal. Why would you then go and prioritize Saquon Barkley? But I don't expect the team, the players in the locker room, to necessarily view it through that lens. What's going on, Big Blue Banter listeners? I'm excited for the football season for several reasons. And one of those reasons is Prize Picks, which is North America's largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform. And it's so simple to use. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including professionals, sharks, and people who are going to exploit you, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you just watch the winnings roll in. It's very simple to play and gives you a little extra skin. I've set my picks in less than 60 seconds. There are so many stats to choose from, and the withdrawals of funds are easy and quick. Dan and I will be adding a segment to our show before every game where we pick our favorite stats, more or less yards or touchdowns, what have you, and we'll be discussing why from a scheme, matchup, and game theory perspective. I love their promotions and how easy their interface is to operate at Prize Picks. I may select more on tackles for a loss from Bobby Okereke or Kayvon Thibodeaux next game. They also do other sports as well. It's a really cool experience. Please join Dan and I in the fun of Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. You will not regret it. Oh, my friends, you know what time it is. You're hungry, you're starving, and you desperately need pizza. You should get the best pizza on the market, and that is, of course, Little Caesars. Make Little Caesars the official pizza sponsor of the NFL part of your game day. Order online during the Pizza pregame all day on NFL game days and even on Pro Bowl Sunday, and get ready for some football fun and cheesy, delicious pizza. Choose your favorite Little Caesars pizza or pick the toppings you crave. Either way, you win. And speaking of winning, everyone scores with convenient delivery or our in-store pizza portal pickup. So grab some friends and enjoy a few slices during the game.
Completely agree, because that's what. So from Shane's standpoint and from the management standpoint, that side of it, to me, Nick, it's just like, I don't think it's as easy as everybody makes it out to be on Twitter or wherever. It's some kind of Madden franchise where you could just totally cold-heartedly be like, nope, that's it. We don't really believe in this Jones Barkley core long term, so we're going to tag Barkley because we still want to get as much usage out of him before his light tread runs out, because he's still a good talent for now. And Jones, this guy's not going to do it long term. Let's get rid of him and just rip the Band-Aid off now. That's not how it works after you win a playoff game, like with the ownership involved and with the fan base involved. There's too much pressure.
The first playoff game they've won since Super Bowl.
Exactly. There's too much pressure to try to keep trying to win. And this is the hard part about, building an NFL franchise in general for every GM and owner that goes through this process. It's like, you have to juggle the value of winning short term versus what's best for your team long term. And I got to tell you, Nick, from following this league, the years I have, most of the time, people fall into the trap of the short-term thinking. It's very few teams I've seen have a long-term thought process. I'm talking about the teams that have been struggling. Obviously, if you're winning, like real winning, you keep going for it. The Allen teams, the Burrow teams, the Mahomes teams, those teams are just going to keep unloading and pushing back salary cap for the rest of the time until those quarterbacks retire. That's what the Saints did. The Saints during the Breeze years just said, F it. We're just going to keep on pushing that cap back until Breeze retires. And I don't care. Like, I'm not worried about ripping that Band-Aid off at any point. And you shouldn't be, because you have Breeze. But like, when you're in the position where you don't have one of those real quarterbacks and you have like a Jones type, you have to make your decision. Like, do I want to try to win now? And by doing so, I have to mortgage my future to get a Bobby Okereke in here. That's what it is. If I want a Bobby Okereke in here, who I know I need to help me win now, I got to mortgage some future. And that's what they did. So I don't totally blame for that. But I will say this on your comment about what Kayvon said. I just personally don't believe the players have any real idea of like the salary cap and things of that nature. I think they've heard of it and they know about it, but like in their mind, everyone should get paid. They never think about like what it means long term, or like what positions should get paid and what positions are riskier to pay based on history and facts and all the stuff we know about running backs. It's just, these guys are heart and soul of our locker room. Saquon Barkley is the face of the franchise, as Kayvon mentioned in that interview. We all know it, or someone mentioned him, and he didn't disagree. We all knew that. And, pay him, and then you pay Jones too. In his mind, it was pay Barkley first, then pay Jones, but both should get paid.
And Kayvon also mentioned at some point during the podcast how we all see what he didn't say Saquon, but he's like, we all know who's putting in the work. And he's not slighting Jones, but he's saying like, look, Saquon Barkley, we know he puts in the work. We know how important he was to the offense and to that playoff push. Why doesn't he get paid? But it's not like Kayvon Thibodeaux is like, well, running back is somewhat devalued and it's somewhat
right.
It's not like he's thinking about it from that standpoint, and nor should he either. He wants his guys to get paid. And I love the fact that he wants his guys to get paid. It shows that he has developed the right relationships with the players on the team who are the leaders of the team, and that he cares about them. So I've really nothing against. So we can go into this conversation too. Like, I've seen a lot of people on Twitter like kind of go at Kayvon. I'm not in that camp. I don't really think Kayvon, because he did not, in my opinion, say Joe Shane did anything wrong or anything like that. And I don't know if I'm trying to think if he actually said like, no, he basically said like, I don't know from a front office standpoint. And I think he said like, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I don't really fully understand that I'm going to focus on me. I'm a player. But like, how can we fault another player for wanting a really good football player on his team, one of his buddies, to get paid? So I'm not really coming at Kayvon from that standpoint either.
No, we can't. And I think there might be a generational gap there, Nick, for me and you at least, because there seems to be the people who are really offended, or not offended, but like hurt, or not hurt, or just angry, I guess, or disappointed, or view these comments poorly by Kayvon Thibodeaux are tend to be the older people, and that's fine. It may be a generational gap thing, and I'm saying it doesn't make Nick or I correct. It just means it doesn't resonate with us the way it resonates with some other groups of people. And I think it is based on age, because they look at it like he should never talk. You should never talk about your teammates. You keep all this stuff in house. And I look at it like these guys are different human beings now. This is Gen Z. Like, they grew up on social media. They're going on podcasts with Carmelo Anthony because it's fun and it's cool. And they're going to talk a little bit. They're not going to just keep everything guarded and in house. And like, what did he really say that was that bad? That he thought Barkley should get paid? No. And then the second part, which I loved, which is that he's referencing explosive plays. And he called it out as it was. He said almost 30%. He almost had it right. Like, he said 30% of our explosive plays came from Saquon Barkley. And the answer was, and I think shout out Bobby Skinner, who went back and did the math on this and did the legwork on it, but 28% of their explosive plays in 2022 were from Saquon Barkley. I mean, he was almost exactly right. That's how in tune the players are, which told me, this was my initial reaction. This is the first thing I thought about when I heard this clip, Nick, which is one, wow, the players know about explosive plays and they know about the importance of explosive plays. How do you think they know that? They're not following us. They're listening to the coaches. The coaches are hammering this home. The coaches are saying how important this is, which also leads me to believe, like, holy crap, if the coaches know this, how the hell are they looking at anything we've seen from Daniel Jones and thinking that there's any kind of long-term future there? No offense to anybody who believes in it, because the explosive plays were not there in 2022. And this is the next point I'm trying to make. Like, he was talking about how Saquon Barkley accounted for 28% of their explosive plays, or 30%. And the answer was 28%, Nick. But guess what? Giants were dead last overall in explosive plays in 2022. Dead last. And Barkley was 28% of them. So what the hell does that leave on the bone for Daniel Jones? He was accounting for basically none of their explosive plays, an occasional throw here. And I don't even know if he had a run over 20 yards. But
yeah, I think 2, maybe 3. One of them was like 19 yards.
Yeah.
I think it was,
like some runs and occasional, we'll get a explosive throw once every 2 or 3 games. Like, this is just like that. That's like, there's no, like, to me, that's where my mind went. Like, why are we talking about explosive plays? Why is this the first thing he's mentioning? How Barkley's accounting for almost all of their 30% of their explosive plays are coming from a running back when they're already dead last in explosive plays to begin with. So where are our explosive pass plays then? Were they even existent in 2022? And if they're not, how do we get back to, because that still has to be the long-term goal. I know not everybody agrees with this. Some people are like, you don't have to worry about explosive plays at all. You can win in the NFL just controlling the clock and controlling the ball. It's like, I guess, dude, but like, not really. And clearly the players are not thinking what you're thinking here. The players are well aware of how important explosive plays are. And if you look at the numbers and the stats in recent years, it tells a pretty clear story that if you're not an explosive team, you may be able to get to 9 wins, 8 wins, maybe win a playoff game here or there, but your long-term chances are very low if you don't have any explosiveness in your offense. And Nick, you've said it best from a schematic standpoint. The biggest issue with that is if you're not using the entire field, it's just so easy to scheme against you as an offense. It's just that, as simple as that. Defenses, and we've seen it against the Giants, defenses start to sit up on everything. They play those cover 2 traps. They're blitzing more often. Everything's around the line of scrimmage. The safeties aren't playing over the top. There's no space in the middle of the field. We've all seen it happen on tape. We've outlined the tape with you. So, they have to find a way to get explosive, but I thought it was very interesting that Kayvon is understanding of that, Nick. And that was, to me, the most important thing that I heard from that. Like, look, they know how important getting explosives back in this offense is.
I don't know how you can look at it any other way, especially when you go and you watch Lamar Jackson, or you go and you watch Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow or Josh Allen in those offenses. And if you're Kayvon Thibodeaux, you're on the defense. Sometimes you're, slow methodical drives. There's merit to slow methodical drives, possessing the football for 12, 13, 14. There's a lot of merit to that, but it's not the whole picture. You need to be able to flip the script and then really pressure the other team. You need to be able to get the football after a sudden change and then hit a 40-yard pass for a touchdown. And that's something the Giants just didn't do throughout the 2022 season. We were saying it back in 2022, even though the Giants were experiencing that type of success. I remember when I first checked the explosive plays, and I was shocked that the Giants were last. I was like, I get that the Giants suck, and we watched the tape from an explosive play standpoint. But when I saw the New York Jets, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Rams without Matt Stafford had more explosive plays than the New York Giants, I was like, I did not realize it was that dire and that bad. So to your point, and as we've already said a couple times on the podcast, I am glad that they are that perceptive in the locker room about the importance of explosive plays.
And just about that, it's like, I remember you being so shocked when we broke that down on the first time we really honed in on that last season or in 2022. But to your point, man, like, they weren't dead last in explosive run plays. They were not dead last in explosive run plays. So despite being dead last overall, they weren't dead last in explosive run plays. That shows how bad the explosive pass plays were in 2022. It was dire bad.
And most of them too were, I'm sorry to cut you off, most of the explosive pass plays, like I think it might have been over 50% were from Darius Slayton.
And then one final thing on that, and then we're going to move on. But I think what you were saying about, like, this is where I think the common, I guess, the disconnect happens when we have this conversation or when we're trying to get our point across. It would be amazing, actually, if you could be an offense that just goes 9, 10, 11 plays, 8 minutes off the clock, 70 yards, bang, touchdown, 0 explosive plays. That's actually better than having explosive plays because it keeps your defense off the field. You control the clock. It's everything you want. The issue is when you try that style, a lot of the times you get bogged down in the red zone because the red zone is a much harder place to call offensive plays, and it's a much more advantageous place for the defense. And the defense has a much bigger advantage when the back of the end zone is your boundary. And so you end up kicking field goals, and settling for field goals are the difference between the teams that make it to the Super Bowl and win Super Bowls in a given season and the teams that can maybe win 9 games, get to a wild card, maybe get lucky, win a game, or lose that game. Either way, it doesn't matter. They're not going anywhere far. Those are the teams that never move the needle, the teams that have to settle for 3. And when you're hitting explosives, you're less likely to settle for 3 because you're never putting yourself in that position of bogging down in the red zone. So you don't get to the red zone. You score before the red zone sometimes. Not every time, but sometimes you'll hit a 45-yarder for a TD, And so that's the biggest difference. Obviously, ideally, the best team in the world would be a team that could go every single drive, 10 plays, 8 minutes off the clock, keep your defense off the field, and it's always 7 in the end. But that's just not how it always works. It's so much harder to convert that to a touchdown when you get down there. And that's another thing that we never really discussed this year, Nick, but is a very true point. The Giants were due for a massive amount of regression, and we saw it this year when it came to red zone offense. Giants' red zone offense 2022 was 7th best in the NFL. They were converting when they got down there. Things were working great. They were turning those long matriculous drives into touchdowns. This year, those long matriculous drives were settling for 3, and the Giants lost a lot more games because they couldn't keep up that 7th best red zone rate, which is hard year over year. Things regress in the NFL. Touchdowns is something that regresses. Red zone success is something that can regress. There's some luck involved in it when you have that condensed field. So that's just the final point I wanted to make. Like, obviously, ideal world, we would love an offense that's ball control and converts everything in touchdowns. But when you have those explosives, you can negate the bogged down red zone part of offense, which is important.
I love how some of our listeners may go to Google and look up what matriculating means. Yeah, and not get the Hank Stram. That's an old time Hank Stram reference we've made for years now on this podcast. But if you want to laugh, go and look up what matriculation means. But yeah, and another thing that we need to focus on, I'm glad you brought this up and you touched on it with the red zone. It's efficiency. What was the Giants offense under Brian Daboll's first year back in 2022? Early, I think the first 7-8 weeks of the season, they were one of the more, I think they were top 10. I think they were 7th overall in overall efficiency. Efficiency wanes, especially when the tape gets out on you. Yep. And one of the reasons why the Giants were so efficient was because they had a rushing attack with Saquon Barkley, but they also worked the play action passing attack, and Daniel Jones was solid in that area. And when they did just have regular drop back passing game, the efficiency in the EPA went up because Daniel Jones did a good job using his legs. But once defense is adjusted to that, we saw the offense hit brick wall. Remember the middle part of the 2022 season after the bye week? It was a brick wall until the Giants faced Ed Donatel and the Colts. Really, that's kind of what ended up happening. The Giants didn't really do much. They weren't as efficient. The efficiency dipped. The offense suffered overall. To your red zone point, I don't want to always rely on creative plays that you need defensive mistakes to thrive in the red zone area. And that's what the Giants early in the season, they had a lot of creative plays, right? Daniel Bellinger was a big factor in that. And the Giants ended up scoring on these plays where I thought Mike Kafka did an excellent job putting Daniel Jones in a position to use his legs and create conflict on the outside of the hashes. And the Giants had a lot of success throughout the season doing this. But when defenses adjust to that, like we said on the last podcast, you need a counter punch. What's your counter punch? You can't always just rely on efficiency. And when you don't have the ability to generate explosive plays, once your efficiency dips, you're absolutely screwed. And we saw bits and pieces of that throughout the 2022 season.
Excellent point. And it's a big part of what I hope behind closed doors, they're discussing all these things, Nick, and they're looking at it holistically and more, not just holistically, but also like more individually. Like, take a look at what they got bogged down. Even 2022, it's remembered by some fans as this amazing year, but they had struggles on offense in the middle of that year. And until, like you said, they got to that Donatel matchup against the Vikings in the regular season, maybe the worst defensive coordinator we've seen over the last 5 years. The defense is totally not on the same page. And then a dead Colts team that had quit on their coach by that point. They really hadn't moved the ball in weeks, months at that point.
It coincided nicely with the ascension of the Giants 11 personnel package. And we gave the Giants, we gave Isaiah Hodgins really a lot of praise for that. And I still think he deserved that praise. The Giants, man, they just didn't, they had that first read, right? Like Daniel Jones did good on the first read, and then he would take the B gap. But when that was taken away, it's not like you had Daniel Jones sit back in the pocket, go through progressions, find the backside dig on a 3-by-1 route. Like, he wasn't doing those things that you see from Matt Stafford. He wasn't doing those things that you see from Josh Allen. I was watching football with my dad. I was watching the Texans game, right? CJ Stroud, he's amazing, and I'm so happy for him. When you see CJ Stroud in the pocket and he gets the football, Dan, everything, and it reminds me of Joe Burrow, it reminds me of Matt Ryan, it's so calm. Everything is so cool. You have these 300-pound guys running at you. It's all nuts, right? Everything's so calm. He seems so collected. When Daniel Jones is back in the pocket, do you get that sense?
No.
You don't. You get kind of like a frantic. He's popping around. Everything's moving. He's going through.
I always say it's clunky. It's very clunky.
It's kind of clunky. It is. And I'm not, dude, again, like, I don't even need to preface it at this point. Okay. Like, it is what it is. I'm not even going to sit here and preface it. So let's go from after the bye week, right? Because the 11 personnel ascension started around that time. You had Daniel Jones throw for 341 yards against Detroit. He threw for like 197 in the week prior against Houston, where it was just like, we're going to give the football to Saquon Barkley 36 times. I think he had 35 carries in that game.
A lot of that Detroit yardage, though,
was about, the 341 yards, if you remember, because context is important. It was just Daniel Jones dropping back to pass. And I think this actually helped the 11 personnel package because it helped Isaiah Hodgins get onto the football field. Didn't know he didn't have that big of a game. It was a Wan'Dale Robinson game. It still allowed him to get on the football field to develop some sort of live action rapport. But it was just the Lions who were in cover 2 the entire time, allowing the Giants to essentially carve them up. And they didn't have that great of a defense either, but it was the Lions kicked the shit out of the Giants. That's what happened. And it was a lot of just garbage time. But after that, you had 228 yards on Thanksgiving against Dallas. That's not a terrible game, right? But then after that, Washington, 200 yards passing. Philadelphia, 169 yards passing. Washington, again, 160 yards passing. And then it was Minnesota, Ed Donatel, 335 yards passing. And then it was the Colts, and this is pretty sweet, right? Because it was only 177 yards passing, but it was insane efficiency. And a lot of it happened early on in the Giants for the first time in what seemed like forever.
Yeah, we're able to have garbage time. We're able to have positive garbage time.
We're able to be the garbage men to garbage time instead of the garbage, because that's what the Giants have been for so long, right? And then again, Minnesota again at Donatel, he had 301 yards passing. I don't want to take anything away. That was great, but again, the defense really did suck. If you watch it, there were so I don't even know what the safeties were doing. They weren't passing routes off. Darius Slayton was running open on these horizontal crossing routes. And then in Philadelphia, it was 135 yards passing. So it wasn't like Daniel Jones was lighting things up down the stretch of the season, and he wasn't lighting things up early in the season. He threw for 71 yards against the Chicago Bears in week 4 when the Giants won. Like, we have to keep this stuff in context and remember it for what it was, or we're going to be doomed to make the same mistakes that we've made for the last, half decade or so, even more.
Yeah, you're right. And the bigger thing for me is just what you said a little bit earlier, Nick, which is even when they did evolve that 11 personnel, maybe if you want to call it pass first, more offense at the end of the year, it still was more of what you were kind of get to earlier with watching, the CJ Strouds and the good quarterbacks versus the ours. It's less of just, I see full progression reads through both sides of the field, hit a backside dig, know something's on your backside, but you're looking, then you hit the backside. It was just a lot of slants flat, curl flat, RPO. All that shit is just first read out of the shotgun out of 11 personnel. Jones was just getting the ball out to his first read. You even saw against the Colts, by the way. They ran a trap coverage on a trap cover 2 coverage against Jones, and Jones wasn't able to read it right because he threw the ball to the curl on that when he's supposed to hit that sideline, honey hole, because the corner's literally playing a trap cover 2, and he's driving on the curl, and he's still throwing to the curl against the Colts in that game. So you're still seeing mistakes from a processing standpoint, even when they simplified it enough to the point where you're just really running like curl flat, slants flat, RPO out of the gun 11 personnel, which is basically all we saw.
It's wild, man. And Daniel Jones, dude, he only had 13 completions beyond 10 yards from the pocket. Everything was rolling.
In all of 2022?
Yes.
What?
So this is 13 completions throwing from the pocket. Again, he's inside the pocket beyond 10 yards. So he was doing it. Yes. He was 13. I have it right here. He was 13 of 33. So 39% completion. And his one touchdown was that one to Darius Slayton. That's not good
Jaguars
at all.
game?
This is outside the numbers. I don't know if I said that.
Talking about the Jaguars game?
Yes.
Oh, outside the numbers.
Yes.
Outside the numbers.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So I tweeted this.
That scared me for a second. I was like, 13 completion and 10 plus yards in 17 games, but outside the numbers.
Outside the numbers. Yeah.
Okay,
I tweeted this. I tweeted this a couple months ago.
People
gave me shit for it, but because Tommy DeVito was actually targeting 10 yards down the field outside the numbers.
Outside the
from
numbers,
the pocket. Right. So there's 3 stipulations there, but those are 3 important stipulations because if you're standing in the pocket and you're not targeting that far down the field, 33 passes is not a lot for the entire season, 10 yards down the football
Only
field.
2 attempts per game outside the numbers, 10 yards down the field.
Yeah.
Holy I can't go back to that, Nick. Like I can't do it anymore. I can't do it anymore, dude. Like I can't watch that anymore. If they go back to Jones for 2024 and that's their best option at QB1, they better have a plan, man. They better have a plan to watch what DeVito did and watch what Taylor did and just try to process this a little faster in real time, man. I'd rather throw 20 interceptions from him and at least start to freaking use the entire field than watch what I watch again. Because 2022 has no upside. There's no actual long-term upside. You can't win a Super Bowl with an offense like that. You're never going to do it. You're never, because people could say, oh, I don't know. What about the Niners? What about this? The Niners throw outside the numbers, right, Nick? Like the Niners are not a team that doesn't throw outside the numbers. So like you can't compare those two. No one's ever done that. 33 attempts outside the numbers and won a Super Bowl.
The elevator pitch to this argument is you just need to threaten defenses vertically and horizontally and make them guard every inch of the football field. You need to, or you're going to basically play into the defense's hand. And we've seen that happen in the past.
Let's move past this part of this, though, Nick, because I think our detractors will say we're back on this somehow again. And to them, I'll say, look, you're crazy if you think we're not going to talk about the passing game and the quarterback at every single pod or every time it relates to this team. It's literally the lifeblood of how NFL teams win and lose in the NFL. It's like saying, don't talk about LeBron. No, it's like saying, don't talk about Giannis. Who cares about Giannis? Talk about all the other players on the Bucks. No. Don't talk about Kevin Durant. Like, this is NBA is a superstar league. NFL's a quarterback-driven league. We're going to keep talking about it until the end of time, no matter who's playing quarterback for the Giants. But we'll move past that because I want to talk about what Kayvon said also in this interview, Nick, and you could play that clip now about Bobby Okereke, because this is the thing. This is the carrot and the stick, right? If you don't do all that thing you did with Daniel Jones and give him that contract and then backload the deal, make it so it's only like a $14 million cap hit, restructure again on September 4th, there's no Bobby Okereke. And let's take a look at what Bobby Okereke means to players like Kayvon Thibodeaux, a young player in the NFL.
And I always give shout outs because people impact me so well. So we just signed a guy, Bobby Okereke. He's our middle linebacker. Absolutely. He got signed from Indiana, this past year. He played with us. And I literally sat and I thank God that they brought him on the team. And I talked to him and we talk, frequently, but his ambition, he's on year 5 now, right? I'm on year 3. But when you talk about who he is at this moment and who I am at this moment, we're not the same player. He embodies who I want to be, right? Yes. When you talk about finding motivation, when you talk, and he literally told me, bro, every day you come in here, you got to find motivation. And it's like being a guy in the league, he say this because he just got paid, right? He got his, that second deal.
Conversations is different.
He said, you know what he said? He made fun of me. He get in a cold tub, right? And he get in a cold tub. He put his neck all the way down up to here. Cold tub. Me, I'm going to the hips. I'm like, He's like, damn, KT, you ain't gonna give your shoulders no love? I'm like, man, shoulders, man. My shoulders don't need no love. He said, man, your shoulders ain't worth $100 million.
Yes. Jumped in there head first.
He said, oh, your shoulders ain't worth greatness? Oh, yeah, okay. And I'm like, hold on, you got me messed up. Let me get it.
It'd be little shit, it'd be little gems like that you may think a motherfucker is joking, which we are joking, but
and then I could have took ego, I could have took the other route, I could have said, forget you, you don't know what you're talking about.
You ain't shit.
But it's like, if he's just saying something positive, even if I don't agree with it, even if it's gonna be hard or hurt, why not try it?
It's constructive criticism. Bro, if you listen, you might just hear something.
You got two ears and one mouth for a reason.
Nick, what was your initial reaction to hearing that?
I absolutely love it, man. And I'm not shocked. Bobby Okereke is the consummate professional. We sang his praises, even though he tried to basically hurt Daniel Jones when the Giants played the Colts last year. That's a little joke. But we sang his praises, and we've heard very good things about his leadership ability. I remember when he showed up and he had his opening press conference, you could just tell he carried himself with a type of leadership, and he wanted to come in here and he wanted to kind of make his mark, but not intrude and be arrogant or anything like that. Like assimilate, but also be like, this is how you prepare for football games. And he'll take people under his wing. And I think Kayvon Thibodeaux laid it out perfectly when he was talking about the ice bath and everything like that. And just going to say, hey, you need to find motivation and you need to really put your best foot forward every step of the way, Kayvon Thibodeaux. And you can't undersell this because you're going to get that second contract like I did, and you want to keep getting other contracts. And now, that wasn't said, but you can, infer that. And also, Kayvon saying this, what do you think Micah McFadden is saying in his own damn position room? Because Micah McFadden was benched, twice last year. Micah McFadden was replaced by Jared Davis, who was on the practice squad of the Lions for a playoff game after having better tape later in the 2022 season. But now he comes in, he gets to play next to Bobby Okereke, and his play skyrocketed. He needs to clean up his missed tackle rate a little bit, that's for sure. But he looked so much better in his second year, and I think some of that should be attributed to Bobby Okereke's presence.
I think a lot of it should be. And Bobby Okereke played every single snap for the Giants. In my opinion, should have been in the mix for All-Pro in the NFL. He didn't get it, but I think he should have been, considering, played every snap and some of the games he put together. He had some fire game tape. Like, he had 2 games that were some of the best linebacker play I've seen from the Giants in decades, if not ever. For me, at least. I wasn't really around. And for those who would, take offense to that, just understand I was too young for Lawrence Taylor and Carl Banks and Reasons and all the really elite linebackers of the Giants, franchise era. But, for me, it's like he plays every snap. He's an insanely good leader on this team, immediate captain, plays great, put at an all-pro level, helped the development of Micah McFadden, even has, this lasting impact on somebody like Kayvon Thibodeaux, just from a mindset standpoint. Like, look, dude, this is the way to do this. This is how I got paid on my second contract. And I wasn't you, Kayvon. This is what Bobby's saying to Kayvon, and I'm sure. It's like, I wasn't you, dude. I wasn't a top 5 pick, right? I had to work. I had to earn this second contract from a spot where I wasn't guaranteed to get it, or not guaranteed, but I wasn't in a position to definitely get it. I had to really get from nothing and pretty much relative unknown to becoming a guy who gets this big second contract. You can do it too. You can get your 100 million. You could probably get even more than me, is essentially what I thought Bobby's saying when he says the 100 million thing. But you got to do all the right things. You got to get in the ice bath all the way up to your shoulders, man. Are those shoulders not worth money to you? And you got to do that. And it's not just the ice bath. That's the example Kayvon used. It's everything they do on a day-to-day basis and a year-over-year basis to put themselves in that position. So I love to hear it. And it's like, it reminds me that, Nick, like, on one hand, am I disappointed the Giants are stuck with this Jones contract for a little longer? Of course I am, because I just have personally lost all faith in any ceiling with Jones. I think he can grind them back to another year like 2022 if everything breaks right. That's, to me, the ceiling of what 2024 can be with him at quarterback. But as far as real ceiling, I don't see it. But it would mean I don't get Bobby Okereke, and I want Bobby Okereke on this roster because I personally don't think that, 1, they could have definitely got a middle linebacker in that last draft. 2, I would want them to prioritize position need over getting the best player. And like, linebacker could also take time to develop in the NFL. You don't just get a rookie and he's immediately what Bobby Okereke was for the Giants last year or for next year. He might not even develop to that point for next year. So to me, it's a position that's kind of rare to find, middle linebacker. So I'm kind of happy they located him and did such a good job with this.
The ice bath is an analogy. It's an analogy for something you don't want to do. Have you ever done an ice bath, Dan?
I haven't yet. I kind of want to get into that. Yeah, I want to get into that whole thing.
Because you don't want to do it. And that's the point. It's like Kayvon said in the clip, he's like, yeah, I go up to my hips. I ain't going to go all the way in, but you don't want to, but it's better for you from a recovery standpoint and from a mental standpoint if you force yourself to do something that you don't want to do. And that was Bobby Okereke's point.
Yeah, it was Kayvon's point, or Bobby's point to Kayvon.
Bobby's point to Kayvon, and Kayvon was applying it to Bobby, saying, this is how Bobby is teaching me to approach everything in the NFL.
Yeah, and again, like I said, I just think middle linebacker is harder to locate than people realize and more impactful on a game-to-game basis. We see it with Roquan Smith. We see it with Fred Warner, 2 of the finalist teams, 2 of the best teams people would say in the NFL right now have great linebacker play. And I think if you look past that, Chiefs have pretty damn good linebacker play as well.
Very good linebacker
and the Lions have pretty damn good young linebacker play coming in there as well, too. So it's like all these teams, and people say linebackers devalued, but honestly, is the actuality that it's not making an impact? I think linebacker play makes a massive impact on the NFL. So, and I don't think it's easy to find. So, like, we got this. He's a great leader. It's everything right with the Okereke signing. And we wouldn't have had that without the Jones contract, which is like the catch-22 of this whole thing. But it's all interesting. It all comes into play. And I know from the player's standpoint, and to wrap this up and put a bow on it, Kayvon just thinking in his mind, I thought Barkley was the heart and soul of that offense. 30% of our explosive plays, he should have got paid. And then they should have paid Jones. And that's fine. The Giants didn't go that route. And I'll wrap up with this. I'm going to shout out a good Twitter follow for those who don't know. He does good stuff around draft time as well and off-season time. KSIXI, who said, you know what my reaction to all this was when I watched this was just, I'm ready for the Jones Barkley core era to be over. And you know what, KSIXI, I can't tell you that I disagree with it at this point. We've done this now for 4 or 5 years now, and it doesn't seem like it's going in the direction, and maybe you can give it more time at this point, another year six, but it's hard to look at it like, Kayvon's right. The Giants should have just paid both, and that's it. You just dump all this cap space into these guys and you keep going. It's almost to me like, I don't really blame them for not signing Barkley, and I almost don't, I almost blame and we're not sure we love the Jones contract. So where are we at with all this, Nick? And I think that's the questions we have to ask ourselves as fans at this point. Like, what do we want from this team? And can we still do this thing with those two as your core taking up, because if they had signed Barkley and Jones, Nick, because that was also a possibility, sign both. You're talking about going into this year, they probably would have, because they would have backloaded some of Barkley's deal, I imagine, too, to get more cap space. You're talking about going into this year with like probably about 65 million of 60 to 65, or no, let's say 55 to 60 million of cap space on those two players, Jones and Barkley.
Now let's play this out. Say Saquon Barkley accepted the original deal.
Mm-hmm.
The Giants probably slap the franchise tag maybe on Daniel Jones?
I still don't think they do though, because then they couldn't have got Okereke. No, the Jones thing was so unreal. Because that's what people are saying now. The hindsight is you should have just signed Barkley and tagged Jones. But guess what? You do that. There's no Okereke. There's no A'Shawn Robinson. There's no way to really win to do what it. Like, okay, let me try to. We'll wrap it up here. But I think it's half-assed to do that, to sign Barkley and tag Jones, but then also, what's the point of even going back with that core if you're not going to try to go all in on it? So I'm not mad at Shane for going all in on that core in that sense of like following through.
But that's not the way I'm approaching this conversation. I'm approaching it from if that happened. Mm-hmm. If that happened, you have Barkley for another like 2 years, and now Daniel Jones is a free agent, and you don't have this huge Daniel Jones contract that looks like it was a pretty big mistake at the time. So if just Barkley were to accept that deal, the Giants wouldn't have to deal with this Daniel Jones nightmare that they're in right now.
Oh, no. I know from a long-term standpoint what you're saying.
But you don't even think they would have given them the franchise tag. You think they would have signed him long-term, pushed everything back, and then they would have been able to afford Bobby Okereke.
Right. I think because if they tagged him, that's 30. They basically, so if they tagged him by doing what they did, Nick, and then also restructuring his contract again, pushing cap hit back on that September 4th date, they basically freed up $25 million in cap space for this past offseason to do the Okereke and to do the A'Shawn Robinson and to sign Dexter Lawrence and to re-sign Andrew Thomas. So I don't know if that, just financially speaking, that's $25 million in cap space. That's a big chunk number. It probably wouldn't have been possible to get all those guys. And then it's like, I value Okereke, and they can get out of this Jones contract at least after next year, and then just have another 20 million more on the books.
I'm wondering if he could have got creative. Now I don't have the numbers in front of me. But like we're mentioning like A'Shawn Robinson, like that was just like you wouldn't have had to sign A'Shawn Robinson, maybe not even Nacho, even though we know the Giants needed defensive line help. So that was a priority. But now you're talking about an alternate universe where Saquon accepted this deal and you were able to come to terms with Daniel Jones, or maybe he franchise tagged, and then you could still afford Bobby Okereke by maneuvering the figures from other people's contracts. I'm wondering if that was a possibility. I don't know.
Yeah, they would have had to get really creative with the cap, and they would probably have to really, really push back those Thomas and Dexter Lawrence contracts immediately. Like have like an Eagles style and Saints style contract structure where there's a void year and they're pushing it all back. The issue with that is then they couldn't have actually gone into this offseason to restructure again because there would have been so much money already backloaded. But yeah, go ahead.
But I'd rather have those two contracts backloaded for two players that I want to see here than Daniel Jones at quarterback.
Of course, I agrry with you.
So that would have been a better universe, I think.
I know, of course it would have been. Any universe where they don't have this Jones contract on the books is a better universe. I hate to say it, and I know it's going to bother some people, but any universe where they're not on the books with this contract is a better universe right now. That's the obvious truth right now. Like I think even the biggest Jones supporters could say right now that they'd probably rather have him not on the books and be able to re-sign Tyrod for like $10 million and go into next season with Tyrod and DeVito, and then you go back and you draft a quarterback in 2025 or whatnot if you can't get one this offseason. But you're still, $35 million less at the quarterback position against the cap. And anyone in their right minds could say that Jones is probably not in a good position to earn the $47 million cap hit, right? Like that I hope we can at least get to that at this point. The conversation, who knows? But like So yeah, it is what it is at this point, though, Nick. But I do think it's interesting to hear like how Kayvon and how these players think about this whole thing. So we'll wrap up there. Thank you for listening to Big Blue Banter podcast. Appreciate you guys supporting the pod. A lot more coming down the line. We're going to hit the rest of our 5-part series next week and the week after that. Hopefully by that point we get a defensive coordinator hire, so we can talk a little bit about that and start to do what we did last year or 2 years ago with the Wink hire, which is, break down some tape from that coordinator or anything we know and see what we can find there as well from an X's and O's standpoint. Thanks again. Keep it locked and loaded. Remember, if you want to help support the show, please, if you're watching this video, hit the like button anytime you hit. It's literally going to take about 1.5 seconds. It's going to make such a big difference for us. So for something for you that will only take a half second to move your hand on the mouse and just click like, makes a massive difference for us. So I hope you're willing to do that. Hit subscribe if you haven't hit subscribe. Hit the bell so you can get new videos. If you're listening, make sure you download. Don't just hit play. And that's about it. Have a good rest of your week. We'll talk to you soon.